All right, Marco Palmero, founder of Ulysses in Dubai. In this video, we're going to have a very interesting discussion around this topic. Can I buy a small business in the UAE and then run it or relocate there in the future? So have a buffer of time which I can use to take care of all the processes and procedures that require me to relocate into the UAE. Now, why do I believe this is such an interesting topic for a conversation? Well, because a lot of people relocate to the UAE every single year. 90% of people here are expatriates. And so I see a lot of individuals, professionals, and self-employed people struggling with these particular issues. And so in this video, I'm gonna share my experience. This is not supposed to be legal advice, financial advice of any kind, but I'm gonna mention and discuss with you some cases that I've seen in the market. Since I'm looking at acquisitions continuously, I also know what has been the experience of people who bought a business and maybe tried to transition from another country and so on and so forth. Long story short, I know a lot of different scenarios. I'm going to tell you my experience, what I've learned after being in the market, and hopefully that can add some value to you and support you in making some good decision. Now, first of all, allow me to say that this is a topic that probably resonates with professionals, self-employed people, but even with big companies, to be frank with you, because many times people want to transition progressively, not in 1 month like I did back in the day. And so they want to take it step by step, and they might have a business already in their home country. Maybe they have a practice, maybe they are professionals that have a little bit of a legal studio or an accounting studio, what have you. And they want to do the same thing in the UAE, but they want to progressively transition there so that they can get accustomed to the way of doing business in the UAE and not cut ties completely with their home country. Because of course, if they're going to relocate there from a personal perspective, it's going to also take a little bit of time, especially if they have family and relatives and so forth. So what is it that I've seen, and is it a possibility for you to buy a business and run it remotely? The answer is yes, absolutely. I've seen many people who bought a business or started a business for that matter, and then run the business remotely until they decided it was time for them to relocate to the UAE completely. Now, some considerations. I think UAE are by far one of the best places to make that kind of play for this specific reason. There's a high level of seasonality in the country, which affects almost any niche independently of the service you provide. And that is because the summers are very hot, and winter time or Christmas time, sometimes even Ramadan time, is time for traveling. And so in those moments of the year, many people go back to their home country and business slows down a lot in the UAE. Now you might be saying, well, Marco, why is that relevant to me? I'm looking to buy a business and move to the UAE actually. Well, the reason why it is relevant to you is because you're going to have periods of time where business is not going to be super hot. Business is not going to be running fast. As a consequence, those times might be very good for you to go back home, and then you might consider spending a couple months in the UAE to run the business until you get accustomed to the way business operates here, and you can kind of like adapt your lifestyle for 12, 24 months and cope with this type of seasonality so that you can progressively make this transition. And so ideally you might say, okay, high season starts from February and lasts till end of April. I'm going to allocate these 3 months to the UAE. Then summertime, I'm going to spend back home. I'm going to keep doing my own thing back home. And I'm going to progressively plan my transfer to the UAE. Then I'm going to be back to UAE again, let's say September till November. And then I'm going to go back home again. And you're going to create this kind of cycle or buffer of time between the two activities so that you can still keep a foot back home while at the same time getting used to the way of doing business in the UAE. And that is not going to affect you too much, because you might want to leave the moments of the year where business is slowing down. And so that might not be a huge loss for you as a small business owner. And again, I've seen many people do that, by the way. One example I can give you is a very good dentist who had a dental clinic in his home country, Greece, but also a dental clinic in Dubai. Now, what he used to do was spend like 2-3 months in Greece and then 2-3 weeks in Dubai to see all these patients here. And of course, he already had a little bit of a system in place, which we're going to discuss is my next point. But the beauty of what he was doing is that he basically ran 2 types of operations. And he said to me, there was a time when I used to spend a lot more months in Dubai than I spent in Greece, because business here was ramping up, was picking, and I wanted to be here. But now I progressively I'm transitioning back to Greece. And so I don't need to spend a lot of time here. I have some good people. I come and see patients that specifically need my help for certain things, and that's it. And so in this particular case, he was transitioning out of the country, but back in the day, he did the transition in the country, and that worked very, very well for him. Now, let's get back to the topic of having a team and buying a business here that you can run remotely. Let's say that seasonality is something that you can leverage to some respect. There's still an issue of running the business, because the business is not going to be shut down the times where season is low. And that brings me to the point of buying a business instead of starting one. Because as you acquire a small operation, you're going to have system in place, staff in place, in let's say, breathing and living organism that you can run. And you're not going to have to worry too much if you are able to oversee staff and set deliverables clearly. And so the point there is, acquiring a small business can definitely enable you to run operations remotely, although you need to be reminded that at least in the very beginning, you're going to need to spend time there to get accustomed to the business and set your deliverables and criteria. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very tough. But provided you accept that as part of the transition of the business, then it definitely makes sense, because you can go there, acquire a business, spend 3-6 months there for the transition, then go back home and run operations remotely until you have handled the transfer for your family, for your business operations, what have you. The point is, the better the business is, the easier it's going to be for you to transition and run it remotely. Because when you acquire a company that is turnkey, so to speak, the owner requires less time in managing the operations. And so you are able to progressively do this back and forth activity from your home country until you're ready to make the full jump. And so my perspective on that is focusing on businesses that are turnkey, or where the owner only spends time in the back end, it would be a preference, because then even if you need to spend time in the back end, you can substantially create systems that enable you to look at these things from abroad. And if something is not right, you can fly in and check things directly. The point is, moving to UAE is possible if you want to transition progressively. Personally, I didn't do that. I just moved here 2 weeks. I was here, so that wasn't my experience. But of course, my personal situation might be completely different from yours. I mean, I was individual. I didn't have any type of family, so I moved on my own. From that perspective, it was quite easy, because the moment I was in the country and everything was fixed from a personal perspective, I could start doing business and there was no issue at all. You might have a little bit of more complex situation. As a consequence, you want to plan ahead of time, and rightfully so. Now, the acquisition of a small business enables you to make that transition in a timely fashion. What I want you to be aware, though, at least from my perspective, is that you don't want to be delusional into, you don't want to delude yourself into thinking that everything can be done from abroad. Because I've seen some people think that way and they got burned a lot because they bought something here, they never came seeing the business, and they ultimately figure out the first time they came that everything was messed up, nothing was clear, and what they bought wasn't really matching with the assets they had at hand at the end of the day. So my point is, you're going to have to put some flexibility into your plan if that is really what you're looking to accomplish. So to transition from your country in a long period of time. But provided you're open to do this type of back and forth activity for some time, then it is absolutely possible to own a business here, buy it, and progressively transition into the country. And of course, once you're here, you can take over operation, do whatever you want. That makes everything a lot easier. I think the more complex thing and the complexity really lies into the managing of that window of time where you're not fully into the UAE, because of course you're going to have commitments somewhere else. I used to do that when I was traveling back, UAE, Miami. So it was quite a trip, to be frank with you. But the point is, that is going to be the tough spot that you need to deal with, because if something is not necessarily right with the business, you might need to fly on short notice. But provided you accept these types of challenges, then that type of transition is absolutely possible. Now, of course, the better the business, the less are going to be the headaches in all cases. And so I feel that, personally, what I've seen is that the transition to a business in UAE is absolutely possible. A lot of small business owners came here and bought a business instead of starting one, because that in some cases enable them to immediately start operations, which might take quite a bit of time if you start everything from scratch, because some licenses in companies might be time consuming to set up in the UAE. And so that was a very good thing for them. Of course, if you are just planning to stay in the UAE for a short period of time, like 2-3 years, probably buying a business is not the right choice. I'm just going to tell you straight out, because I've seen so many cases of people who did that and then they were unable to sell their business at the end of the cycle, at the end of the 3-4 years they were here. And they were forced to sell at a discount, making it a very bad investment for them. But if what you're looking to do is transition fully here and maybe spend, I don't know, a minimum of 5 years or more, then this long-term planning and buying a business for this long-term planning absolutely makes sense. And we have tons of deal flow from that perspective because we're looking at opportunities ourselves. Of course, we're on the ground, so it makes a big difference. But the point is, we supported other people that were looking at similar scenarios, although most of them were companies, to be frank. So they were big companies in other regions that were looking to enter the Middle East and also transition some of their executives in the region. The scenario was very similar. The only thing they had, which was less of a complexity, is they didn't have to take care of everything themselves, because of course they had staff and a lot of people who can handle a lot of the things for them, so the personal stuff and so on and so forth. But the point is, the deal flow that we have really enables people to pick the best possible option for their needs in terms of business acquisitions, and then execute on that so that they can accomplish their goals. By the way, if you're interested in DealFlow in the UAE, you want to find off-market business acquisitions that might fit your needs for this long transition, check the link below. We do take on only a few engagements each quarter, but provided we have slots available, we're happy to look at your case and see if we can help out in some way. Now, I hope this video can answer some of your questions. Of course, it all depends on what your case is. There are no unique answers to these types of problems. Those are just feedbacks that I received from the market in conversations that I had with people who did similar things, and hopefully they can help you a little bit in understanding how to approach this thing. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.